You guys all set, or you need this? Everybody good? All good? The rest of our folks are coming in. You want to come up or no? You guys want to come up? Oh, come on up. You're Tammy, right? Okay. Well, thank you. A big part of our being here today, our reason to be here today, and I thank all of our chiefs and our partners in law enforcement. It's a challenging time for all of us, and you are our closest partners on so many of these things. So I appreciate you being here, but I appreciate you every day. So thanks so much for coming, especially my local chief. You know, my past, my current, all that. I'd like to introduce with me today, starting from my right, your left, is the Assistant Superintendent Tammy Evans from Oakland Schools, our County Executive Dave Coulter, our Prosecuting Attorney Karen McDonald, the U.S. Attorney Seaman Mosen from downtown, but she's Eastern District U.S. Attorney, and then our friend from the FBI who we're going to miss, Tim Waters. So thank you for being here. Representing the Oakland Chiefs is Chief Ron Moore from Wixom, and we also have the Berkeley Police Chief Matt Kane, who's the president of OCTAC. And why the chiefs are here, and I've mentioned this before, we in Oakland County are unique. We got together as a law enforcement family and team and created OCTAC many years ago to train every police agency in this county on procedures and on active shooter activities, so that should this tragedy ever come to our doorstep, we hoped and prayed it wouldn't, but that's not a strategy. Preparation is. We prepared for it, trained for it with our partners from local, state, and federal, so that should this dangerous, dark day happen, instant partnership and teamwork would go into the school, not wait outside, not stage, because every second is potentially a life, and that's what happened on this dark, tragic day. So thank you to my partners. Thank you to OCTAC for having Oakland County on a footing to be prepared, and tragically, we're going to be doing a lot more training in the future because we'll learn lessons from this just like everyone has from tragedies around the country, and we'll seek ways to be better. We always have to be better because we can't afford to lose one child. The primary purpose of this at the moment is to also address the false information that is out there and continues to circulate. It costs a great deal of resources to run these down, to tell people time and time again that some of this information is false or disconnected. I've said this a number of times. There were multiple threats that were investigated in the Oxford and Oakland County area prior to this event that people are convoluting into this event. Those were investigated and cleared as non-credible and are not related. The Deerhead incident, the countdown clock, there was another threat that turned out to be out of Georgia. None of those have anything to do with this case or this incident or this perpetrator. In fact, the countdown clock was actually a local bar running a clock when a band was going to play. So please, those that are sharing this information are inflaming the anxiety and fear of people. They had nothing to do with this, and they could not have prevented this had they been investigated further, because A, they were investigated and deemed not credible, and B, they weren't related to this whatsoever. Secondly, and I sadly mentioned this yesterday, we anticipated a flood of false threats. I don't know what is in people's minds to think after a real tragedy, it makes sense to make threats. And typically we see it fall into two buckets. One is they think it's funny. It is not. Two, they think it's a way to get out of school. It is not. It's a crime. Even if it's not a credible threat against the school, to make a threat because you think it's funny or you want to get out of school, it will be fully investigated by me or all of our partners, depending on where it happens. And we will hand the baton to our prosecutor, and I'm confident they will be held accountable. So if you're making threats, we're going to find you. It is ridiculous you're inflaming the fears and passion of parents, teachers, and the community in the midst of a real tragedy. At this point, I'm aware of over 60 schools that have been closed because of threatening behavior. It's overrunning our resources to investigate these false threats, and they fall in a number of buckets, including the circular threats that are not related to anything or have already been investigated but are being posted and posted and posted, and completely false intentional threats. So, every threat will be investigated. But again, it's important to note that regardless of the reason for the threat, funny or other reasons, it will be investigated and we will seek criminal charges. Because there are so many things going on and so many threats in the environment right now, I've asked our friends at the FBI and at the Secret Service for additional support of our cyber crimes and our cyber investigations that we have going both on this particular tragedy and of all the threats that we're seeing in this environment. And I'll have the friends from the FBI, Tim, speak to that directly, but they both have agreed. So they're going to be throwing in extra resources so that we can get much farther along and faster ahead of some of these threats, rather than just have our computer crimes unit and our cyber folks trying to run that all down. Did you want to speak to that, Tim?
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. So.
Yeah. Sure. As the sheriff said, my name is Tim Waters. I'm the special agent in charge here for the FBI in Michigan. I've lived and worked in this community for over 21 years now, and I have to say this last week has really been probably the most challenging for me and my folks since I've arrived. There's nothing more horrific than our children being at risk the way they were on Tuesday. The men and women of the FBI are also members of this community, and as such, we are grieving the loss of those four individuals and praying for the speedy recovery of everyone else that was injured that day. But we're also parents who want nothing more than for our kids to be safe, which is why we're all here today. For the FBI, we've worked hand in hand with all of you over many, many years. We've stood up a command post back down at FBI at the Detroit headquarters in response to numerous requests we've gotten for assistance from all of you and from the sheriff. I have about 40 people in there working 24/7 right now to track down every single one of these threats. To date, currently I'm tracking around 25 threats, of which 13 have been fully mitigated. And of those 25, 13 have been complete circular reporting that the sheriff spoke to. There's a lot of people out there that are, concerned, and they have every right to be. We encourage folks that if you have any threat information, to please report it to your local law enforcement contacts, or you can contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI and provide that information. As the sheriff said, a lot of circular reporting out there right now. As an example, from 2018, there was a threat out of New Mexico of a threat to a school. That piece of information has been recirculated hundreds of times in the local community right after the tragic events on Tuesday. So, as the sheriff said, this really, pulls resources off in a place they shouldn't. We shouldn't be wasting these resources. We need to focus on the real threats. So, if people out there have their threat information, please report it, and we will investigate it vigorously. I promise you that. Thank you very much.
So, again, just to be clear, we're not saying don't share with us or with our partners. If your school or business or house of worship is in one of their patrolled areas or ours, definitely share it. We'd rather get way too much information than miss one kernel that could be life-saving. We check out 1,000 nothings to make sure we don't miss the one real. So definitely share it. But when so much unsubstantiated recirculation on social media happens, it just scares people. That's not the place to share it. The place to share it is with the police so that they can investigate it. You know, we see so much of this, and it scares the heck out of people. And it's not just schools. I probably get every cycle, a whole circle that I heard women are being kidnapped from, and they'll name a local mall. And it's not true. But it gets circulated thousands of times before we have a chance to say it's not true. So please, talk to your police. That's what we're here for. And they'll be happy to give you the real scoop, and if they don't know about it, investigate it. Couldn't be more important for us to stay focused and make sure that these kids in these schools get some reassurance. We fully anticipate the schools will be reopening Monday. That's up to each school district and each school. But all of us are going to work 24/7 to make sure those schools are safe. You know, we're all assigning extra people to be in those buildings and to reassure students and parents, and that's not going to stop. But what we need to do is come together, not get more torn apart. Any questions?
Yeah, Chief, sure, I'm sorry. You talk about reassurance, you talk about sharing. This morning you said that the 2 teachers came to the school to say that they were worried about this particular shooter, alleged shooter. That there were concerning behavior, that there was other things going on, yet the school never told law enforcement. So what reassurance can you offer people that that is something that will happen? It never gave you the opportunity to investigate anything. How concerned are you about that?
Well, obviously that information didn't come to us until after the tragedy, and in 2020, everything looks much clearer. But I would say this, and I've said this time and time again, share more, not less. So if there's any question, share it. And in this situation or any other situation, that's what we're here for. We have to work together. And in fact, I think I gave a specific example where a parent had been told by their child who was 6 years old, another child said they were going to bring a gun, and they didn't dismiss it. They told the school told us. We had deputies there. They took a gun from a 6-year-old. Dismissing information and not sharing it can cause great problems.
Sheriff, are you
Do you
aware?
think the school made a mistake in not sharing that information with the resource
I
officer
don't
at
want
the
to get into
school?
specific of this case or this investigation because the baton's been passed to the prosecutor.
I
And we're in
understand.
that phase. All I would say again, we would rather have more contact than less. And if there's any question by any school or person that something's concerning, please involve us if we're your agency or your local police, if someone else is.
Sheriff, have you been made aware of a social media post that appears to be from the accused shooter's mother indicating that that handgun was a Christmas gift bought for him and that they practiced with it?
I have not seen that. I don't know if our detectives have. You know, well, if you want to send that to us, I'll make sure our detectives have it. I know they have a lot. It's my understanding it was bought 4 days prior, so it may be an early Christmas present if that turns out to be a verified post. I don't know.
And a question for the assistant
Can't leave it
superintendent.
Yeah, can we hear from the superintendent, because they have not responded to any questions
This
from
is
the
not of
media.
the school district. This is the
Okay,
ISD.
so
separate
this has nothing to do.
organizations.
Prosecutor, is it possible the school's being looked at for negligence or potential charges for what happened or didn't happen?
And I know the sheriff's told you many times, the volume of evidence that exists in this case, there were hundreds of witnesses, There's hundreds of hours of video and digital evidence. You know, I can't answer about what mistakes were made. We don't investigate mistakes, and we don't investigate, the sheriff's department does. We're looking at the entire situation, and we'll hold accountable to the extent possible anybody we think committed any kind of criminal act. That's really all I can say at this time.
What charges are being looked at for the parents or being explored?
We're reviewing potential charges and hope to have an announcement about that in the next 24 hours.
I wanted to see if I can ask the question of the US Attorney. Are you looking at anything in terms of the gun sale? Is there any concern, you know, obviously it would be the ATF and it would be a federal violation.
At this point, we are here to assist the Sheriff's Department, the Prosecutor's Office, to the extent that there is evidence of a crime, whether it's a state crime or a federal crime. Because we're working together, a decision will be made as to where those charges should be levied. But we stand here to assist our partners. And I think that that's an important message for the public to understand, that the resources of the United States Attorney's Office, the FBI, all of our federal partners, you know, we're going to use them to assist in any way we can to ensure that those who are responsible are held and called to account.
Sheriff, prosecutor, was the gun bought legally, and if so, was it bought at a shop locally in person? Was it bought online? Was it transported from another state here? What can you say about the gun?
It's my understanding it was bought legally, it was bought by a parent, and it was bought at a local shop.
Can we talk about the threats just quickly? You said that you anticipated a flood of threats and that you saw those.
Yes.
What form did they come in and who were they directed at?
You know, we've had them from
Was it calls?
12-year-old kid getting off a bus saying he's gonna shoot it up, to a recirculation of old threats, to you name it.
Social media?
Screenshots of Snapchat, screenshots of different things that have nothing to do with even Michigan. I mean, we're getting inundated with unbelievable amounts of digital, what about this, have you seen that?
Sheriff, you got a lot of concerned parents out there. I know you said school's gonna be open on Monday, but has there been any discussion with the districts about possibly going back to virtual learning?
Well, ultimately, you know, what happens in terms of whether they open and how they open is a school district and a school building choice. We're just doing everything we can to reassure them that we're gonna help them. If they wanna be there in person, do it safely, and we're confident that that can be accomplished, you know, having 60-plus schools closed across this state, or this community really, for everything we've seen so far, false threats, is disruptive, it's scary, and it's wrong.
Does that mean having police presence outside in the school parking lots, outside the school entrances too?
Yeah, I mean, it will be a case by case depending on what the thing is. If, like I said, you know, we have a situation where somebody shows something and it turns out to be a different state, then it really doesn't necessarily make sense to have uniformed police officers standing outside and raise the anxiety. But if it's somewhat related to that school, or there's any credibility to it, obviously, I'm not gonna tell you the kind of response that will be poured into it, but there'll be a response.
Thank you.
Sheriff.
Are you aware of any warnings from the teachers to the school that they may have heard or seen something concerning and warned the school about it? Has that come up?
It's my understanding that this, if you're talking this particular case, that this individual did not come on the school's radar at all for either bullying or problem behavior or questionable behavior until the day before.
Prosecutor McDonald, Orlando Brand Williams with the Detroit News. Have you received a warrant request for the parents?
No, not at this time. And I just also want to stress, just to support what the sheriff just said, a false threat of terrorism is a felony. It's a 20-year felony, and we will charge it and we will hold people accountable. I also want to state that this is a scary time, and I think the best thing we can do as parents is to talk to our children about the seriousness of this, because we have to assess the whether or not the threat is credible, but we'd rather not have to do that at all. If you talk to your children and have a forthright discussion about this is not the time for jokes. And then I just also want to reassure the public that we have so many people here, the chief's standing here, we all work together. In addition, I've heard from the Attorney General, the Governor, the Michigan State Police, we are all working together. And I have every confidence that our community we will feel safe, but we have to get through a very challenging time.
While we're having this venue, can you and the sheriff comment again, please, on what we do moving forward? We brought this up in a couple of news briefings, and by that I asked yesterday, prosecutor, you talked about we have to be better. We talked a lot socially about laws, gun reform laws. Sheriff, yesterday you mentioned your frustration with laws are on the books, we bring people in, they're pled down. I'd love to hear from each of you, what are the most constructive steps moving forward that we can move the needle that even gun owners and surveys want to do? Why aren't we getting it?
I'll take that question. Our office takes gun charges very seriously, and if you look at the data that we collected since I took office, I think you'll find that we seldomly reduce those cases. But the data and the science shows that there's a lot more that goes into reducing gun violence than just charging a felony firearm. When I say that I think we need to do better, I say that there are many, many responsible gun owners in this room, and I am very close to responsible gun owners, and you have a right to possess a gun, but with it comes responsibility. And making it accessible and not securing it and allowing it in the hands of somebody that shows signs that they may hurt somebody is not okay, and those people should be held accountable.
Sheriff, people are watching this.
I'll follow up. So when I talked about pleading down and things, I wasn't talking about our prosecutor. I talked generically about what we've seen across the country in my role as head of government affairs for Major County Sheriffs of America. We're seeing a hesitancy to charge felony firearms and mandatory firearm prison time. And I think the only way you send a clear message to people that carry and use a gun illegally is to hold them accountable. And whether it's to, criminally investigate and prosecute people that attempt to purchase a gun and fail the NICS or whatever it is, when people break a law about a firearm, hold them accountable. I mean, the kid put the gun wherever he put it, that's a crime. He can't possess a handgun. When he went into the school, that's another crime, even before he started pulling the trigger. So we have a lot of laws, but when people cross that line, they need to be held accountable. When we catch people with a handgun and they're a felon, I think they need to do prison time. And there's a lot of discussion about making our prisons, criminal justice system better. I agree. But you can never take your focus off the victims and the people that are actually committing violent crimes. And if they're carrying a gun illegally, it's not as a personal kind of accoutrement with their attire. It's their planning or are willing to use it. And they ought to do serious hard time when we catch them with it. And I think that's a way we send a message as a society, and we get the really dangerous people out of our community.
Sheriff, for those that are watching and wondering, why is the superintendent of Oxford Schools not up there with you?
Well, they're obviously dealing with a lot of crisis internally, and they have to, obviously take care of their staff emotionally, the students. So this isn't necessarily their venue to talk about all the threats to other schools. Certainly if we were just talking generically about their school, we would have invited them. But this is about threats all across the county. And so we have a representative of the county intermediate school district.
When was the last time you had contact with his parents, the suspected shooter's parents? And do you know where they are? I mean, it seems like they were in a car watching the arraignment yesterday.
Yeah, that would be a question for our detectives or even the prosecutor that
Are
we
you
probably
cons-
wouldn't answer at this point in
Well,
any event.
are you concerned at all that they may flee?
Well, I'd be getting into what the detectives are or are not doing, so I probably won't mention that.
Bouchard,
Sheriff, can you give an update on the conditions of the victims at the hospitals?
I think we do have an update recently. I know some of them an upgrade. I'll try to get you, if somebody could print that out and we'll read it.
Was there a school resource officer there when this happened? Anybody who tried to stop the attacker?
Well, he was actually one of the deputies that took him into custody. He wasn't physically at that location at the moment it started, but he was one of the first to get back there. A lot of the school resource officers cover more than one school, so if something happens in a middle school or they've got to visit a grade school, You know, they may be circulating or back at the substation, whatever the case may be, but he was one of the two deputies that confronted the suspect in the hallway.
And that resource officer was never made aware of the Monday or Tuesday incidents involving the alleged shooter.
Was not.
Are you concerned about that he wasn't made aware?
Well, we've kind of asked and answered that. We
You haven't
certainly,
really
we're focused on actual investigation and prosecution. There'll be a lot of time for speculation and frankly, finger pointing. Now's not the time.
Sheriff, at the risk of perpetuating another internet rumor, one that has had legs among credible sources is potentially this person, the suspect, being involved in an email chat of some type where threatening to shoot a school and had other people threatening to do the same on different days of the week.
We've seen that.
Any concerns? Is that legit, or are these one-offs when we talk about people calling in regard to threats?
We've seen that where it lists multiple schools and there was an alleged pack of different people to go every day.
Is there anything in concert?
We have seen no evidence that there was anyone else involved in this situation with him or anything to follow on. And that's one that's terrifying a lot of folks, and we have absolutely no credibility so far that we've uncovered to that.
Is there a reason for the community to be concerned? You said you received a flood of threats. Have those all been dispelled, or?
To this point, we have not had one turn out to be credible.
Thank you.
Prosecutor, this is like an anecdote. I have a gun. It's my gun. I bought it. I give it to my buddy. He's not supposed to have a gun. He takes my gun, he goes to a store, robs it, shoots somebody. I know I'm liable legally because I gave a gun or allowed somebody to have a gun. What charges? And I've seen it in different cities and different states, ranges of charges. And this has actually happened a number of times. What charges could I face? Could I face a murder charge? Could I face a manslaughter charge? Negligent homicide? I'm trying to skirt the answer that you were hesitant to give earlier, but I think it's an answer that a lot of people are looking for.
I understand, and I understand why people want to know, and I understand why you're curious about that. But I have a lot of very horrific, serious crimes on my hands, and I don't think it would make much sense to deal with a hypothetical at this point, but I'm happy to answer your questions when we do announce whether or not we'll be charging anyone further.
Is that coming by the end of the week, early next week, any idea?
I said within 24 hours, unless something else occurs that prevents me from doing that. I do need to sleep, but I'm going to do my very best.
Thank you so much.
Prosecutor Orlander again from the Detroit News. What is the violation that people could face, charges from making these threats on social media?
There's a false threat of terrorism, which is a 20-year felony. There's also a misdemeanor of malicious use of a telecommunications device.
In Southfield, there was an arrest of a teen that brought another student, turned him in. Not to be melodramatic, what would you say to kids going back to school Monday? They're all moving forward in these types of instances. We turn the message to some extent, but we're going to enter that building pretty soon here. And, maybe that's an example of what happened in Southfield of what they need to be looking for. As bad as that sounds.
Well, I mean, that's a message of exactly what we're asking for. If another student turned them in, 99 times out of 100, another student's going to see or hear something first. And whether it's okay to say, or whether it's the FBI, or whether it's us, or whether it's tell mom or dad, or tell somebody in the school administration staff you know and trust, or a resource officer, best bet, because they can deal with it immediately. That is what we need. That is what ended that situation in Southfield, for whatever reason. I mean, sometimes, people do things without an intent, and sometimes it's with an intent. Doesn't matter. You can't bring a gun to school. So, I'm confident of our partners are committed to the same level that they will do whatever it takes to protect their kids in their schools. Okay, I've kind of been the bad cop for a bit. Now I want to be the good cop. There's a lot of people that are hurting out there. So if you are hurting, seek help. Seek counseling, seek services, you, your kids, whatever the case may be. I know our own staff is hurting. We've got a lot of people that are pretty numb, our folks that were on that scene, and I was in that scene and I know how horrific it was. It's even worse if you're in the middle of it as it's playing out. If you're a child and that was your school, or you're relating to that situation, there's a lot of ways that it can affect you. It is not weakness to ask for or seek help, it's strength. And that includes our profession. We are in a spike of law enforcement killed in the line of duty. And you know what eclipsed it for the last 2 years? Police suicides. We need people to be more open and willing to go ask for help, and we have to have more resources. And in my role as head of government affairs for Major County Sheriff of America, we've asked for more mental health programs, services, and funding at the federal and state level for communities, for schools, and first responders. If you are hurting, people want to help you. Please reach out.
Dave Coulter, the county executive. I just want to speak to that and elaborate for a minute. I'm not in law enforcement. I run the health department, however, and we're very concerned about the mental health of our teachers, our students, our parents, and our communities. I want to reinforce what the sheriff said. There is no stigma involved. Mental health issues can affect anyone, including the brave men and women in law enforcement. There's a number of resources on our website, ogov.com, that I encourage people to call out. If you see someone who's not acting right, please talk to them, encourage them to do the same thing, to reach out. We're also going to be rolling out additional resources in the near future. And I've been in contact with the governor and the state officials who have assured me that they're going to be providing additional resources for this as well. And then I just want to make one other very quick point, because this is a press conference essentially about our kids being in school. Our kids weren't in school, many of them, last year for an extended period of time because of a different threat, COVID, a health threat. What we learned from that is there is a learning loss. Kids need to be in school when they can and when we can keep them safe. We would not be encouraging our schools to put kids back in the classroom if we didn't think it was safe and that these fine men and women couldn't protect them. We think they can. And we think that the learning loss and the social and educational loss from not being in the classroom is too great. And so what we saw today was unfortunate because so many of the threats were not substantiated. So I just want to encourage everyone, when you post something that's not validated or you don't know is true, or you post something that you intentionally, we will prosecute you, but more than important that you're interfering with the basic education of our children, and we just can't have that. So I encourage you to please think twice before doing that and stop people from doing that where you can. So,
County Executive, I want to pose to you the same question I've been posing. There is information that the school knew something was wrong here. We don't know what that is because no one has said publicly. You're telling people to come forward if you see something, say something. Here the school had the opportunity to do that, and it appears they didn't do that.
So, I'm not law enforcement. I haven't
I
seen
understand,
that.
but you're the county
But what I
executive.
would say is this: if you're at school and you talk to an educator and you don't feel that they're taking your concern seriously enough, elevate it to these guys. Take it above them. I mean, that's all I can do. I'm not aware of the evidence that you're talking about. Thanks.
And I said, where we stand today, would I wanted us to be involved and told?
But
Absolutely.
you understand that piece is missing, so that is why. And a lot of parents certainly, and I think parents have.
I get it. I get it. And
I'm sure we're gonna get answers. I'm not saying that, but I think something's missing.
clearly, I wish we would have had more information than we have based on the totality that we now know? Yes. I can't say it more clearly than
Right,
that.
and the school's not here to answer the questions that need to be answered, and they're not still answering any of the questions that need to be answered.
I can't speak for other people or other organizations. I can only tell you, we want people to tell us more, not less.
And that seems like that didn't happen in this case.
Other questions?
Chair Bouchard, I apologize if you covered this, but want to know what is it that you all can do in light of the threat to have parents, teachers, and kids feel safe? Are there any plans?
Well, as I said, all of us are already ramping up our investigations. We're ramping and re-ramping our contacts with our local schools and communities. You can talk to every one of these law enforcement leaders, and I'm sure they'll tell you they've been talking to their superintendents or their principals or whoever the case may be. And they're also putting action plans into place of what they need to do in terms of resources, preventive resources and responsive resources. Obviously, we're not going to disclose publicly what those would be, but for a lot of reasons, not the least of which you won't want them to be defeated by an adversary. But rest assured that all these people are not sleeping because they want to know, is there one more thing I can do to make sure our kids are safe?
Would it include, sir, metal detectors and extra police officers at school campuses?
Well, obviously there are extra police officers already on campuses. We've been pushing a lot of our folks out to the schools we patrol, and I'm sure all of my partners have been. To the question of metal detectors, as I mentioned yesterday and the previous day, that's a question for a school and a school district to decide, because there also comes a cost of how oppressive the environment is to children as they go through. Like, a lot of people don't even like to fly because of going through TSA. Do you want a child to do that every day? Given the statistical probability of it touching their school, doesn't minimize what happens. When it happens, it's absolutely terrible. But you already have researchers saying we shouldn't do school drills because their school probably will never get hit. Now, I disagree with that 1,000%. But all of this is a balance that the schools, the teachers, and the parents have to decide individually for their own school.
Those 60 schools that are closed, are those in the state of Michigan, and are those closures a result of the threats that have been received?
They're all right in this region, and they go, I think, as far north as Bay City was the last report I saw. So it's pretty much epicentered right here and then kind of farms out. But I would be stunned if we looked a little further that there weren't schools closed or at least threatened across the country, because when Parkland happened, as an example, we spiked with threats. So I would not be surprised to see other cities, states spiking as well.
So those closures are a result of threats that have been received, is that?
They're not credible threats, but they're the anxiety level that has come as a result of this. And because there's so many disparate threats coming in, and it's pulling resources so greatly, before we ever say it's all clear, we want to clear that threat. And when you've got 100 threats and you only cleared 80 of them, you don't want to go back into the building.
So out of an abundance of caution with threats that have been.
I think it was more calming, an abundance of caution, not because there was any real concern of anything that any of us and any of you that has anything different to say. We don't have any credible threat in any of the facilities we patrol, and I don't think any of my partners do either.
Can you estimate how many threats you have had?
Hundreds. I mean, I don't know the exact number, but.
How many emails we got this morning?
And the best way to do it is to contract directly through the police department phone number or their email, because sometimes people send it, to different social media accounts that aren't monitored real time, and it could sit in there for days. So if it's a real deal, that's the last place you want to be sending it, is by Snapchat or Instagram or by Facebook Messenger, and not have it looked at for 2-3 days.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Is this the update?
I'm gonna mail out the update.
Oh, well, you do that.
Okay, so I got stuck with this. Just so everybody knows who's
He
here
put the list
from the
together.
local law enforcement. We got Corey Haynes from Madison Heights, Noel Klassen from Bloomfield Hills, Matt Kane's already been introduced, Mike Shaw from the State Police, John Ellsworth from Wolverine Lake, Scott Sarvello from Clawson, Phil Langmeyer from Bloomfield Township, his old department, Ron Moore from Wixom PD, who is also the president of the Chiefs Association, Chris, South Line, I'm sorry, Chris, Chief, what's your? Sovic, I apologize. He's also, aren't you the treasurer of the Chiefs Association?
Yes,
He guards the money.
He's getting old.
Yeah, getting old. Jeff Baker from Auburn Hills, Paul Chicanis from Walled Lake, John Fitzgerald from Keego Harbor, David Malloy, my buddy over there in Novi, Harold Rossman from Lake Orion, And we got Mike Moore representing Royal Oak PD. If I missed anybody, I apologize, it's because you didn't sign in.
So that gives you some flavor of how many chiefs and agencies are here, but every chief and agency that's not here is 100% with us.
Now, several called and said they couldn't be here because of ongoing things.
Sheriff, not for your curveball, but is there any updates of relevance that you might have on the victims who are still hospitalized?
Yeah,
Put that up. I've got it, I just gotta dig that out of the.
yeah, I did get an update about an hour or two ago, and most of the updates were good stuff, but we'll actually put out a release so you all get it in your box.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Always lands on the party.
I was, last 7